Your friends are scrolling through short content, but you, my friend, you're here to learn. Welcome to TRS Clips. Do you want to give us the story? What's the story there? How did you meet him at the start? How did you agree to document his journey, etc.?
I had been admitted to the Ayurvedic college in Pune. So I was studying Ayurveda. And I did not want to be obliged to take money from my parents. So I decided that I would arrange to get a grant from the US government. That grant was to study how Ayurveda was being practiced in Pune. And for that purpose, I was interviewing all kinds of Ayurvedic doctors in and around Pune. And so one day I heard of someone who had come from Bombay and was said to know quite a lot about Ayurveda and other things, and about tantra also. And at that time, I was under the impression that tantra was a very dangerous thing, and I was told to avoid it. But I thought, well, at least I need to talk to him, and I will be very careful because tantra is very dangerous. And so I went and met him, and conveniently for me, he was living a 20-minute walk away from the Ayurvedic hostel where I was in Pune. And I met him, and he seemed like a perfectly harmless person. He didn't seem like some sort of black magician or anything. And so I met him, and I said, I would like to give you this questionnaire that I prepared. And he said, let's not bother with the questionnaire. Let's just talk about this and that. And I was very interested. And over the next couple of days, I met him several times. And at the end of that period, I found out that he had answered all my questions without bothering to look at the questionnaire. So that was impressive. He also asked me whether there was a particular mole on one part of my body, which in fact there was. So it was clear that there was something to this. So we started to spend even more time. And he lived in Mumbai, but he had come to Pune for the races. At that time in his life, he owned thoroughbred horses. And the RWITC, the Royal West India Turf Club, during the monsoon races in Pune, because the stables here in Bombay are underwater. So he came back several times during that period for the races. I met him several times. And then we went to Alandi together. Alandi is just outside Pune, where Jnaneshwar Maharaj's Samadhi is. And then I was very interested, and then I started to move in that direction.
Do you want to give the audiences some context on what he did in the real world? He was just a normal human being going about his normal life, but also was a practicing Aghori behind the scenes.
Yes, he had spent time as a sadhu, mostly in Girnar, as a naga, a naked sadhu.
Really?
But then he was told by his guru that he had to come back to the world. He had to get married. He had to have a family, and that there were things he needed to do in the world. And so he came back, and even before that, he had been introduced to Aghora. He had not wanted to be introduced to Aghora, but there was someone who had deliberately taken him out of Bombay to Mithila and introduced him to Aghora. But once he was introduced, he started performing Aghora sadhanas, and he would do that even while he was living in Bombay, wearing ordinary clothes. When he was wandering around and going to the race course, he would wear ordinary clothes. When he went to the smashan, he would wear what was appropriate in the smashan.
A mashan is a graveyard.
A smashan is a cremation ground.
Okay.
And he, at different times, he owned a dairy in Borivali here in North Bombay. He owned a rock quarry on Sheva, which is an island in the harbor here in Bombay. And so he had done a number of different things in his lifetime. When I knew him, he owned racehorses, and he was racing the horses and betting on them periodically and making money off of them and supporting himself that way.
But how had he taken up being a Naga sadhu in the first place? What was his childhood like? Like, how did it lead up to like the Naga Sadhu?
Well, his childhood was his father was a member of a family who had originally come from Gujarat and had become very rich over a period of time. He himself was the 15th generation living here in Bombay, and they lived on Malabar Hill. And they had a very large bungalow that I never saw because it had been sold and broken down. But interestingly enough, there's a building on Malabar Hill called El Cid, and our racehorse trainer was living in El Cid at that time. And El Cid was built where his garden, the garden of that bungalow was. So, as sadly is sometimes the case, there was a disagreement when the Hindu undivided family was broken up. There was a disagreement. There was litigation, which means the lawyers made a lot of money and everything. But so slowly the affluence diminished. But he was still very young when there was a Jain sadhu, a Suri, who had, even while he was still very much a very young man, probably in his late teens, took him to Darbhanga, to Mithila, and got him. And he was his parents were devotees of a Bengali saint named Harnath Thakur. Harnath Thakur. But they were devotees of Harnath Thakur, but his family belonged to the Pushti Sampradaya, which is the sect that was developed by Vallabhacharya about 400 years ago, the fifth of the five great teachers of Advaita Vedanta. So his family was a very, very sattvic, very mild vegetarian kind of family. And as was he was never interested in doing this kind of very intense sadhana. But this Jain Suri, this sadhu, this holy man, had looked at his horoscope and saw that he could succeed at a particular kind of sadhana, at a particular kind of process for gaining the attention of and creating a connection between himself and a particular Devi, a particular goddess. There are many, many Devis and Devatas here in India. Some of them are Saumya, some of them are gentle, like Vishnu is gentle, and Lakshmi, Saraswati, they're gentle. Some of them are Ugra, and Ugra means terrible, horrible, intense, like Kali and Tara and Chinnamasta, blood-drinking goddesses, and like Bhairava and Bhairavi. Bhairava literally means he who terrifies. So that Jain sadhu understood that Vimalananda could do this process, perform this sadhana, for which he had to sit on a corpse, and that he could succeed at it. Because just doing sadhana is one thing. Being able to succeed at it is also very important. So without telling him what he was going to do, he said, let's go to Darbhanga, let's go to Mithila. There's something very interesting you will see there. And once they got there, late at night, it was a new moon night, which is a good time for doing this kind of thing. He then said, okay, now that you're here, you're going to have to sit on this corpse and you're going to have to repeat this mantra. And Vimalananda said, I'm not going to do that. And the Suri said, well, if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you see those men over there, they will kill you, and then I will sit on your corpse. So what would you prefer? And then Vimalananda thought, maybe it is better for me to at least sit. I mean, who knows? I may die anyway, but at least I would prefer to die trying it out instead of definitely dying because those thugs over there are going to kill me.
But this was a Jain monk.
Yes.
But aren't Jains the most sattvic, and aren't they at the other end of the spectrum?
And the vast majority of Jains are at the other end of the spectrum. But of course, sometimes what's on the surface is different from what's underneath. And this Jain sadhu had been worshiping a particular yantra, but he had not wanted to do this shava sadhana, this particular kind of process of sitting on the corpse. He had not wanted to do that himself, because that itself would be a karma. So he had been looking for somebody that would do it for him.
Even the Jain sadhus actually follow aspects of Tantra and Aghora?
Some of them do. A very small number of them do. Most of them follow the tenets of the Jina Dharma. But a very small number of them, and I never met this, his name was Jina Chandrasuri. He passed on many, many years ago. So I never met him. But I have no idea how many other people would do that. And generally speaking, especially for this kind of thing, you don't tell people that you're going to go out and sit on a corpse. That's because they may not like it. And then,
okay.
So how many Jain, I imagine that very, very few Jain sadhus do this, but this particular one was interested in doing this.
And this is sometime in the 60s or 70s?
This would have been probably in the 30s.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So Vimalananda was really old when you had met him?
He passed on when he was at 67 in 1983. So he had been born in 1916. So this would have been, he was probably right around age 20. So this would have been in the mid 1930s. So there he was. So now, and there is the corpse. And now he realizes he has to sit on the corpse. And now the Jain gives him a bottle of, he used to call it Svoboda, anyway, country liquor. And he is, Vimalanandaji at this point has never tasted alcohol before. But he thinks, and what am I going to do here? And the Jain says, you have to drink that whether you like it or not. So he drinks it, gets very drunk naturally, and thinks that, okay, and this is the first time he's been drunk also. So now he's drunk. There's these men who are going to kill him if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. There's this dead body here. He sits on the dead body the way he's supposed to. He starts to repeat the mantra, and he has a mala, a rosary, and he repeats just a very few mantras, and a jackal. A jackal is a small animal. It's the dog family. A jackal comes to him and bites him and draws a drop of blood. And suddenly, there is a goddess standing in front of him. The jackal has come just to collect the blood, and now the goddess is there.
Like the jackal turned into the goddess?
Yes. And then she says, Varambrihi, what would you like? Please ask a boon. He said, I didn't ever want to do this, and I would like to go back to Bombay, please. And she said, you ask for something more meaningful, please. And he said, no, I need to go back to Bombay. So she said, okay. And she took him back to Bombay.
Was the goddess Tara?
Yes, Smashan Tara. So there are many different varieties of Tara. The Buddhists have the Tibetan Buddhists have 21 different varieties of Tara, whereas if we look from the Mahavidya point of view, there's a group of 10 goddesses here in India called the Mahavidyas. And that Tara is an intense version of Tara. Ugra Tara, Ugra means horrible, terrible, intense. Smashan Tara, meaning the Tara of the cremation ground. And sometimes she's called Neela Saraswati. So Saraswati is the goddess of learning. And she's normally shown as being wearing white clothes and having a veena, a lute, and a book, and being very Saumya, very gentle. But the blue version of her is this very intense blood-drinking goddess. So there he is back in Bombay. So, and then he starts repeating the mantra again, and the goddess appears to him again.
He's immediately transported back.
Immediately transported back. That's what he told me.
Okay. And
of course, he is now wondering whether maybe he dreamed the whole thing. But he notices he still has the mala in his hand. There's no corpse. There is no cremation ground. he's sitting in his house in Bombay, but he has the mala. And he thought, well, I didn't have this mala before. So then he starts repeating the mala, and the goddess appears before him again. And then she says, you need to go to the smashan, to the cremation grounds, and continue repeating this, and then we will talk about what to do next. And so then he went to the cremation ground, and then he started establishing a relationship with this goddess.
Where was the ground?
I am pretty sure he went to Banganga, which is the cremation ground that it would be closest to where his house was on Malabar Hill. He did a lot of sadhana in the Worli Smashan, also here in Mumbai. And there came a point where he had to go to Benares, because Benares is a place which is sometimes called the Maha Smashan, the greatest of the cremation grounds.
What happened after this in his story?
Well, it took him a while to get used to this idea that he had suddenly been transported back to Bombay. Now he was establishing a relationship with a blood-drinking goddess. Meanwhile, on the outside, he still had to behave in an appropriate way with his parents and his sisters and so on. And it took a few days, but the Jina Chandrasuri came back from Darbhanga and then was telling him about how he knew that this was going to work out, and how it was going to be great, because now he was going to tell Vimalananda, Jina Chandrasuri was going to tell Vimalananda exactly what to do, and then they would make a lot of money and be successful. And Vimalananda said, "Stop right there." I'm paraphrasing here. I never wanted to do this. You forced me to do this. But now that I've done this, I don't have any interest in you. I'm interested only in the goddess. So you please go away.
But how were they going to make money?
I'm sure he had some. There are all kinds of methods of. Shakti is Shakti. So if you take Shakti and you manipulate it in certain ways, money is a kind of Shakti. Beauty is a kind of Shakti. Fame is a kind of Shakti. There's so many different. Shakti means energy.
Okay, I've got to stop you here just to give some context to some of our viewers. We had someone called Rajarshi Nandi on the podcast recently. He's an advanced tantra practitioner, and he's taught me and the audiences, and I'm sure it's the same audience watching this particular podcast. He taught us about tantra, so I'm going to do a bit of a recap. He said that the goal of life is spiritual evolution. The aim of life is to achieve nirvana or moksha or enlightenment, connecting with God once again. If you pray, it's like you're walking towards that goal. Imagine the purpose to be like a road. If you pray, you're walking on that road. If you do bad things in the world, if you do bad karmas, you're walking backwards on the road away from that goal. If you meditate deeply, it's like you're in a car which is moving on that road. It's going faster than normal. If you practice tantra, you're going in a really fast car. And if you're going about Aghora in your life, it's like you're sitting in a Formula 1 car, like a race car, and then you're going on the road. So it's an extremely fast way of evolving spiritually. What I understand here is that the practice that the Jain monk made Vimalananda do was some Aghora-based technique which hastened his own spiritual evolution. He was able to summon the deity, and the deity appeared in front of him. Probably the Jain sadhu saw some kind of spiritual potential in Vimalananda already from a previous life and said that, okay, you're more capable of calling this goddess. The thing is, when you see a deity and you achieve that spiritual evolution, you're able to extract Shakti or some kind of power from the process of Tantra. And you're saying that that power can definitely be used for spiritual evolution, but it can be used for other things like beauty, like fame, like money. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out this playlist for more videos just like this. It's TRS Clips.